Good morning, Bill. How are you, sir?
I'm doing pretty good. It's the overcast weather in the fall, like right around this time, Halloween every year. It starts to get cold in Texas, and
Yeah,
the allergy kind of profile changes, and there's just all sorts of stuff going on. So it's a interesting time of year.
yeah. You sound like you're under a little bit of this whole thing.
A little bit of crud, and I get a little bit of like the winter blues too. Like I
Oh,
just love the
really?
sun so much. Yeah, I'm huge. Like I joke that I'm actually Superman. I'm related to the family. Like I need the yellow sun.
And I love nothing more than like fall weather and the bite in the air and the I like that kind of cloudy, kind of chilly attitude. For me, I don't really like winter. I just like the transitionary kind of phase.
Yeah,
So, I
yeah.
don't know.
I like the air. It's cool. It's a nice change of pace for sure. I like that much.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So
It's way
yeah,
too hot down here in the summer.
yeah, for sure. Stay inside. Lots of AC.
Yeah. Sorry. Oh,
Yep.
I guess I'm in my eye. How was the weekend?
Pretty good. Nothing particularly, outstanding. Like meaning just that pops out in the timeline. So
Hmm.
standard stuff for the weekend. Tried my hand at cooking chicken parmigiana.
Oh, how'd that go?
Pretty horrible.
Pretty horrible, he says. Okay,
Yeah,
fantastic.
yeah.
What
So
what where'd you fail?
well, I followed the instructions. That's
Okay.
that's the problem because I called for olive oil on that panko coating that you'd put on to fry it at first, kind of an iron skillet, and
Hmm.
you know coated it and did all the thing, and then put it in the olive oil. But the problem is olive oil is a low heat oil,
Mm.
and the instructions said to use olive oil, but it said to use medium high heat. So I burned everything in
Oh,
sight.
interesting. Hmm.
So I was like, maybe they know something I don't know, and it turns out they don't.
So sounds like a fault with the recipe, and less of a fault with the cook.
I think so. I don't think I'm like dodging responsibility here. Like
Okay.
it seems so. And I even put it under the heat they recommended, and it still burns pretty bad.
Wow.
But
Hmm.
it
So
was fun. It was a learning experience.
okay, did you eat the bird food, or were you like, "Oh, this is garbage," and you threw it out and you went and did something else?
I ate the burn food.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
That's respectable, I would say. I have more respect for you knowing that you ate it as opposed to throwing it out.
Well, I mean, it's good. Any good American boy knows you clean your plate.
Yeah.
Hey,
If
how we
you're
operate.
if you were a kid in the 80s,
Mhm.
you have been brainwashed into the importance of cleaning your plate no matter what.
Yes, there are starving children in Africa. How dare you? That is the thing.
That is true.
So yeah,
I'm
well,
gonna
the
go.
good. So I burned the oil
Mhm.
really badly. So that house smoked, and it was all of that
Oh
routine.
yeah,
And then I
that's.
brought it down and was
Mhm.
like, okay, now let's try again, and it still burned. So I
Oh
didn't like
wow.
charcoal it. However, I did. It was definitely burnt.
Okay.
So I wasn't eating bricks. I would have thrown bricks out. I don't need to eat pieces of charcoal, but
um, I'm trying to think. Did we eat anything especially interesting over the weekend? I don't think so. Yeah, just normal recharge, no surprises.
Mhm.
Did some gaming, watched some TV, hung out with the family. Like very exactly what I want on a weekend, which is good.
That's great. That's positive. So Dylan, there you go. We had a good weekend. How was your
Yeah,
weekend, Dylan? We did. Was that Friday night? Or was that Thursday night that we did that?
that was Thursday evening. Yeah,
Oh,
that
we
was.
didn't go on the air Friday.
We didn't go on the
God,
air on Friday.
like I don't feel like we've talked about it. Yeah, that was a good time. That felt like a
Yeah,
weekend, didn't it?
that did feel like a weekend. Yeah. So Dylan has launched a show called The Sales Sleuth, and
Ooh.
it's awesome. And he invited me to come on and be a guest. And so I do a thing that where I make myself go back and watch
Mhm.
my tape, right? Because as a salesperson, as a professional, you go back and you look at your performance and you look for meaningful ways to improve. And I know it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable just to listen back to your calls. Watching your video calls back and analyzing your facial expressions and their facial expressions and did you talk about the right things is uncomfortable. But as far as being able to control the conversation, a
Yeah.
sales conversation is probably one of the best ways to see like the high level of control that you can have as far as being able to like lead a conversation and facilitate one. Being a guest on a show is a completely different experience because I'm not in control. It's not my show. They're not my questions. And so some of my quirks show up way more frequently in those
Mm.
kinds of situations because I'm reactive to the chaos of the moment as opposed to like leading this other person into a chaos of a conversation.
Right.
And so I do a thing where I watch every guest spot back because it's the most uncomfortable I could be because it's the least amount of control I can have in a conversation. And so Dylan, Jake, myself, and another person in my community, Jason Whitlock, all got together and watched this video of me on Dylan's podcast, and we drank at a couple of my crutches. So every time I said like, every time I said right, and they weren't in context, we all had to drink. And so I think Dylan went through like a third of a bottle of whiskey every time I said one of these things. I went through probably 4 or 5 fingers of whiskey and then a beer. Jake was drinking beer. We didn't even finish the video because we started drinking.
We ran out of alcohol.
Yeah, a fair amount of time. But I was talking about some of the other crutches that I'm working on to improve as a speaker, and just things that I'm not concerned about. We also got the opportunity to give Dylan some feedback on his questions and how he can improve the show from his side of the hosting side. It was cool. It was a good time, and I didn't have a hangover on Friday morning, which was like really fantastic. That's the thing I was probably most excited about. No hangover.
Yeah, I mean, you got to account for that these days, for sure.
Yes,
it's definitely a possibility.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was fun. It was a lot of fun. We laughed a lot. We learned some things. We had a good time.
Yeah, the Pavlok got some use because I was wearing the shock bracelet as well, so that was always fun.
Yeah, that was definitely fun. Cool. So Dylan has an interview. Good luck to your interview today.
Yeah, man, good luck.
Great. I'd actually hope more that you find something that's. I'm not worried about you interviewing. I want you to find something that you're really going to enjoy. So
yes,
yeah, you'll crush your interview.
There's this, last night my daughter, we had this Halloween candle, and every night she's obsessed with lighting this thing, just must light it.
Mm-hmm.
And so a couple of days ago, it was just like a regular cigarette lighter with like a child lock on there, and like she doesn't know how to get past it, because she's a child and isn't familiar with these things. And so I'm showing her how to do it, and then she can't get it. So then she has like the aim and flame, right? The thing with the long stick, and she's trying to push the button and pull the trigger, and she can't do that either. And I have this moment, like this is the curse of knowledge showing up right here, because I was about to be like, how can you not do this?
Right. Like you're like, wait a minute.
With all the snark and sarcasm and incredulity, if that's a word, that I can muster, I'm about to just be like, how can you not figure out how to get this lighter lit?
Right.
And so I was just, as I do, I was about to make this comment. I barely reined it in. Hey, don't be one of those idiots. She's a child. And then I was like, whoa. You and me talking to Dylan about, hey, man, don't take a role. Don't take any role that'll hire you. Hold out for a role that you really want to do because there's one out there. Curse of knowledge.
Yep, for sure. For sure. It's like, bro, I got to eat. Like, I just drank all my whiskey. I'm out. Like, I need a role.
Yeah. But like, it's like that with everything. Hey, say no to this deal because you don't really want it. You just want the revenue. You'll find a better deal.
Yeah.
That's the curse of knowledge. That whole idea of the reason that you're not excited to be out prospecting and networking is because you don't have clarity on who you actually help. That's curse of knowledge. So much is just kind of hid behind this veil of I figured it out, so I know how it works and I can trust in the process. But if you've never been there, you can't trust in that process at all.
Yeah, you passed through the curtain and you're to a next stage, but you don't know what's beyond the next curtain. But you can tell people what's on the past ones. And so I think that's part of being coachable, as allowing people to tell you things that have worked and you accepting that without seeing it.
That's
leading in that way.
I get a lot of pushback about being a sales coach. Everything from, you have to teach people to lie to other people to, I
Wow.
the pushback and brush offs that I get from people that are actually hiring salespeople is insane, you
Yeah.
know. So, but once again, I have the curse of knowledge over here of like, it's not as bad as you think that it is, blah blah blah. You're actually doing this, you just don't know it yet, and everything else like that. It's such a fascinating thing because coaching is, in my opinion, being able to like learn lessons from others
Mhm.
because you'd rather learn their lesson than go through it yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Being coached absolutely is.
Hmm.
Yeah. 100%. That's the whole point. It's like, help me skip the line or at least shorten the process a little bit so I don't have to take so many bumps.
Yeah, and that was like a big realization for me. I think last year was that not everyone is going to be open to coaching, which is just insane to me. But once again, I have the curse of knowledge, right? I've
Right.
had so many different coaches and I've had so many different outcomes, and I know what I need in a coach personally versus one that isn't going to really get me anywhere.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I'm so much in the other direction. So whenever someone is like, "Oh, I don't even think I need a coach," like I've got this figured out. Okay, man. I hope you enjoy that recarving of the wheel that you're about to go through.
Right. Yep. But all been there.
All
It's
been there.
it's one of those things. So I'm trying to remember the book. Oh, Yes and that's the book I'm just finishing right now, and they talk about stage actors. I was going to actually recommend this one to you if you hadn't heard about it because you'll love it. It talks about Second City in Chicago,
Ooh,
and
nice.
that they're in improv. They've been around since
Mhm.
the 50s, which I had no idea. But there's a very famous thing for anyone who's pretty much been through stage acting, especially
Yep.
improvisation, that know that yes and is a
Yes,
technique.
and yeah,
Um,
I've heard of the technique. I've not read the book, but I'm
oh,
interested
good.
in the book.
It's so good. It's so, so good. And it's one of those things where they talk about everybody who has been on stage for a professional in any way knows that failing and ensembles are the two massive things that you can't do without on the stage. You fail every night, you learn something, you do better the next night.
Mhm.
And then you work as an ensemble, not a team. A team has leaders and it's not flat, as far as
Oh,
like
interesting.
authority.
Okay.
An ensemble is flat. We all work together in a scene to make a scene work. There is nobody who's the boss. There's just players in the scene, right?
Hmm.
So that gave me kind of a new twist, I feel like, on coaching, is a coach is no better than a coachee, and a coach has no, I mean,
Agreed.
they have authority just by position, but like we're just an ensemble. And these are some things that I found and you haven't found. So we're
Yeah.
just sharing, right? So it's, every time you read something else about it changes your POV just a little
Mhm.
bit.
Yeah,
And
a
this is
smidge.
a good one. Yeah. So this was a good one.
Nice, interesting. I just wrote it on the board. I'll put it on my Amazon wish list. I finished a book last week, Spin Selling by Rackham,
Hmm.
and he was one of the first people to, and I didn't know this, I guess, one of the very first people to take like a very data driven approach to like sales training testing and
Hmm.
really looking at what works and what doesn't, right? And the thing that I really loved at the end of the book was he went through and he talked about in the appendix, right? And he starts the appendix with like, "Hey, if you're someone who reads appendixes, you're my kind of person," which
I
I
was just thinking,
which I guffawed at, right, as I'm
yeah.
listening to this appendix on Audible. And he goes, "Well, here are some ways that you could discredit some of our research," right? And he just calls himself to the carpet. This sample, this sample, this sample. Here's what this means. And and then for himself, he went out and he reran these experiments with like kind of different variables to try to minimize those things. And I just really appreciate that, right? Because there's so many other people that won't hold themselves to that kind of level, to that kind of microscope view, right? And I really liked his approach on that. And the methodology, if for those who don't know, who have not read the book, it's about asking questions to lead the person down a path so that way they have self-discovery.
Mhm.
Because what they have shown time and time again through the studies that they've done is that features and benefits have less appeal in bigger complex deals, and uh, closing techniques also have less power in bigger,
Yeah.
more complex deals. So essentially, the same thing I've been talking about for a while, but this book has been around for a very long time, which I did not even know about either. So very, very good book. And they do a wonderful job about talking about how these questions should be built. Right. So, and his guide, some very like, this is one kind of question. This is another kind of question, which is like very, very nice, because they're not just like, hey, go out and ask questions. Right. And then people are like, what keeps you up at night? They're asking about, there's different kinds of questions in the SPID method, but one of them is an implication question. So does that mean that's you implying that this thing that they're talking about might have a bigger impact to get them to come with you? And then there's need payoff questions, right? So it does a really great job of categorizing these different kinds of questions, and then, actually kind of quizzing you, which is super nice.
That's cool. I was just thinking, features and benefits are really table stakes. Like, they should just be on your website, right? Like,
yep.
Are we even a fit? Great. So now when we talk, it's more about application and aspiration, right? Because like, what could happen if this actually worked out? Yeah. And then specifically for you, how these things work to help you reach the aspiration. But there's just so many good books out there now on question asking. I just love being alive when there's things like that available, because if you think about it, 30, 40, 50 years ago, there just wasn't. People weren't writing.
There just wasn't. Yeah. And it was all huckster, grifter, it was all good. And okay, so I say that, but it probably wasn't ever as bad as anybody wants to make it out to be. Even me, like, looking in the rearview mirror, right?
Yeah.
The 10% ruins it for the 90% kind of situation.
Definitely.
So I don't know. It very, very interesting book. So that is done. I finished that one. I'm currently reading Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance because it's been highly recommended. I'm about to start Play Bigger. We're going to do a book club inside of the Sherpa Slack community for people who want to read that book. So that'll be interesting. I'm going to post about that today.
Awesome.
And yeah, that's kind of it. A client is doing a big implementation of a new piece of tech, and so the kickoff call for that is today. So I'm excited to kind of see what is going to be unveiling for those folks. And I have a disc breakdown this week, which I'm excited about. Those are my favorite kind of calls, and everything else is just variation of the norm.
Yeah, I mean, same. It's interesting, right? So today's Halloween. I don't know if there's going to be people on and off as far as working, but I have a little bit lighter schedule, so maybe so. For today. And I've got my first pre-sales call. Like, so I'm going to get with the salesperson. I watched their first prospecting call. Okay. So I got to watch and see what their pain points were and see what they've tried. And they're all in on the methodology. They love Marcus. So it's more like, what's the best way to kind of bring them across the finish line with a coach. So I get to have that. That'd be exciting. My first one today.
So are you closing the business, or are they closing the business?
Yeah, the way we do it is baseline selling is the methodology we kind of live by here. Is there's 4 bases, and prospects are first and second, third, fourth, or home. And that first base is normally taken by the salesperson just to go, okay, let's find out if you're even.
Yeah, discovery.
And then coaches step in at second base and really work with objections and fears and try to be the good question askers to work for Fitment and really coach them, not sell them, just coach them on the call. And then at the end of it, decide if it's a, good, because you can get all the way to home base on one call if it's a good call. But baseline selling says you don't have to. Like, we just work the call to make sure we're a good fit. And if it takes the call, it takes the call. And then we schedule next steps, So
interesting.
Yeah, that's the way we're not a one call close people. It's not like our methodology.
Yeah. The bigger the deal gets, the more unrealistic it is to expect a one call close. Right.
I mean, even the ones that I've watched that were one call, they had a call, except it was 3 months ago. And, we just have to go back in HubSpot and say, oh, we actually touched them before. This is what happened. How do we do this again? Oh, we don't. This is not a first call. So, Cool.
So have you and the sales rep sat down and talked about how you guys are going to kind of coordinate and run the call? Who's talking about what points, transitions, baton passes, all that stuff?
So that's what we're doing today. That's what I mean by a pre. like a
Oh,
pre-call.
okay, nice. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
I'm down for
and
that.
typically the salesperson doesn't chat a lot. It's if you bring the coach on the call, the coach basically runs the call. They
Hmm.
set you up, introduce you, like, hey, this is so and so. This is why he's here. This is what he does. Like the authority setup essentially, and
Yeah,
then then the coach runs the call. But
interesting. Hmm.
the sales rep we're assigned to, she has all the intel, right? She's had all the information. She's done all the research. So we're an ensemble. We're being a team,
Yeah,
and we're figuring out the best way to have the call.
and I like that you guys are having a call to discuss like what needs to happen on the call because in kung fu, one of the things that my teacher talked about all the time is that like there's the like again, is that it's hard for two people to fight the same person at once. They have to be trained to fight as a team because the concern is I'm going to hit my buddy
Yeah.
while trying to hit the enemy. So let me just kind of wait for my buddy to figure this thing off, right? And so what happens sometimes is when you're running a sales call and there's multiple people in it,
Mm-hmm.
it can be everyone stepping on each other's toes, everyone in the way of the other person, people not agreed on which talking points. So taking a second to really break down, hey, like how's this call going to go? Who's going to open the call? Who's setting the agreements? What are we talking about? Okay, this is going to happen. I'm going to pass the baton to you.
Right.
These are super important things because why would you be winging it in front of your prospect?
Yeah, that's true. Especially with larger ticket items, I think
Yep.
specifically.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good thing. So I was
Yeah.
curious, speaking of sales books, I
Mm-hmm.
saw one pop up, Jeb Blount.
Blunt. Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. So he's got a new one out.
Is this a selling in a recession one?
Yeah, I was curious what you thought about
Yeah.
that.
Um, I don't know, honestly. I like Jeb Blunt. I really like Fanatical Prospecting. I really like Sales EQ. These are two books that I recommend to lots of people, especially if they're newer.
Yeah.
Sales EQ honestly should be read by anybody who's carrying a quota, in my opinion. It's that strong of a book because it really talks about all the little stuff that people miss when they're leaning into features and benefits, right? They're still getting shut down and they can't figure out why. It's all in that book. You're not coming across as credible and on levels that you're not even aware of yet. So super great book. Fanatical Prospecting is just really about never taking your foot off the gas, always doing a little bit. Very, very
Yeah.
strong book.
Yeah.
I don't really know what he's going to talk about in this new book that is going to really add context onto the situation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it's going to be. So I read Fanatical Prospecting, and I like Fanatical Prospecting. So that's why when this came across, I was like, you know what, I like his writing style, and I could get into that. And the sub headlines: 55 ways to stay motivated and increase sales in volatile times. So
yeah, that feel like
is it going to be too woo woo? 55 ways to stay
that's
motivated.
my concern, right? Like motivation is super important, right? But right.
Yeah.
If how do I say this the right way?
I
If you're always chasing motivation,
Yeah.
something else is misaligned.
Right.
Right? It shouldn't be that difficult to show up and do the work. If it is, you're either in the wrong lane, you're in the wrong zone, you don't have clarity into what you're doing or something else like that. And once again, this is the curse of knowledge talking about, right? Because you and I both know how to get a bunch of stuff done and deal with like, resistance and, avoidance and these other things. So
Mhm.
hopefully, because so far he's been really good about this, hopefully the book has got actionable tips and
Mhm.
not just, every no is one closer to a yes and all the standard kind of stuff that everyone talks about
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
drives me insane.
Well, that's why I'm actually, even if it does end up being some more motivational type stuff,
Mhm.
because I know a little bit about his POV, I don't feel like it's necessarily going to be a whole lot of that. So I'm still
I
curious
agree.
to know what.
Yeah.
So what do you think, having written a book
Mhm.
and gathering reviews beforehand and doing all the things you're supposed to do, right?
Yeah.
How much do you feel like you can rely on reviews? Because that's one of the major things I
Ooh.
like many other people do, right? I scrolled
Mhm.
down to see if anybody had reviewed it yet, and then my
Mhm.
first instinct was go, "Are these real?" Because we both know lots of people go out
Yeah.
there and grab reviews from their buddies, which is fine. I mean, I don't hate you for
Well,
it, but
I think
hey, Michelle, good morning.
good morning, Michelle. Um, very, very interesting topic because because for some people I asked to pre-read because I wanted their opinions and feedbacks. That way we could try to potentially make changes, make small improvements. Okay. And then
Yep.
some people read the book early because they were part of the launch team, right? And so it was
Mhm.
about, hey, did you like the book? Are you willing to help us out and stuff like that? As far as collecting reviews before the book launched is not really something that we did a whole lot. Um, I would do more of that now. Now, the interesting thing to me is when you're a guy like Jeb Blunt, who's had 6 or 7 books, I'm sure he has a huge following, a big email list, a huge social following, and everything else like that. How many people are so excited to give him a
Right.
positive review so that way they show up as a potential blurb on the book
Correct.
or on that sales page to kind of like
Correct.
that to me is where it starts to get a little
Yeah.
how do I feel about this?
Yeah. They're gonna ham him up because they want them to see. That's a good
Yeah,
point. To
they want the
see,
coattail
hey,
ride.
yeah, yeah. Well, and they want Jeb to be like, "Hey, thanks, man." They just want the kudos
That
from Jeb.
that
You
is
know.
also true, right?
Um, yeah. Hey, yeah. I'm definitely gonna go through this. I'm interested.
I mean, it's just a book. How many buy it?
Oh, I'm going to. I am 100%.
Yeah, okay.
I'm just discussing because it's the stuff that's going through my head, as I do
Yeah.
this. But no, like
Ramit Sethi has got one of the best lines about books ever. He goes, if there's a book that I want, I'm just gonna buy it.
right.
Like but just that idea of like, oh, do I buy this one? It's a
Yeah.
book.
Yeah.
Just buy it,
Yeah.
right? The worst case situation,
It's
you
not an
buy it,
apartment.
you read it, you get a couple of nuggets,
Yeah.
and then you go sell it to half price books
Right. For nothing.
for nothing.
You
But
could donate it to Half Price Books.
But yeah, I don't know. That's very interesting. I got some feedback on the book last week from this woman named Cynthia, and she was just talking about the tone of it, which is a reoccurring thing that we hear about on the book, right? Oh, the tone, right? This felt like two salespeople just talking together. It didn't feel like you were trying to come in heavy-handed or anything, which is just kind of a byproduct of how Melissa likes to write anyway. So
Yeah.
I think that stuff matters. Like, or do you talk about it in a way that is exciting? I think it's.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to that stuff, you really have to get good at like reading between the lines of praise, right? Oh man, this is such a good book. Oh, what did you like about it?
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to getting happy ears, right? Because like the sales version of that is, well, I'd like to work together, but I'm going to need a discount. Oh, you want to work with me? They didn't even hear the back end of that of the phrase.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think whenever someone is like, oh my god, I like the book. It took me a long time to get through it, but I liked it. I'm over here. Took you a long time. Okay, cool. And then I'll go sit and I'll think about that. Not because I'm focusing on it, because anything over than the minimum is telling you something.
It's true. It's true. I think that where we can color that to based on our own personality and points of view is how much weight we give the statement
For real. Yes,
over the
absolutely.
minimum. If they said it, it's something they thought, but is it important? Like, was it actually really even an issue, or is it they wanted to give you something more than just I liked it?
Well, that's where the second question shows up, right? Hey, does it normally take you a while to read a book like this? Oh
Right.
yeah, all these books take a long time.
Yeah,
Okay, cool.
exactly. Yeah.
Like no longer a concern because this is consistent with how they normally act in this thing.
Yeah.
But if it's like, okay, well, that doesn't normally take you a long time to like finish a book. Actually, no, I can normally plow through these B2B books. Okay, interesting. What do you think was different about this one?
Right.
That to me is the craft. That to me is being like, and that comes from the sales thing, right?
Yeah.
Digging in deep, understanding motivations, understanding the other things in charge, being very proactive and looking for pitfalls and potential objections and dealing with them when they're a conversation, not when they're objections, and all these other things. But it requires a level of listening that, once again, is a skill. So you have to hone it and figure it out and be very thoughtful as opposed to just launching into your talking points.
Agreed.
So
Yep. Well, I'm going to buy the book. So
you should buy the book.
No
I'm
worries.
curious. Yeah. I'm going to wait on the book until you tell me that it's worth reading. How about that?
Yeah, that sounds good. You got other ones ahead of it.
Yeah,
I do too, actually.
I've had way more raw sales books than I think you have potentially.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
Absolutely. I'm still in that circle. So I'm trying to get sales people to coach me on the right books to read rather than just reading them all, you know?
Have you read Never Split the Difference?
No, but that's on the list.
Oh man, that
I've
should be
wanted to for a
next,
while.
Tommy.
Yeah,
That
I've
should be
watched his
next.
stuff on YouTube. I love that guy.
I've never seen this stuff on YouTube, honestly. Dylan sometimes shares that in the community. I just don't really like the book. I don't like watching sales training videos, I think is really what it comes down to on YouTube. Of all the things that I think I would want to watch on YouTube, sales training is not one of them for some reason. I don't know why that is. I wonder if I'm avoidant. I have a question for you, sir, actually, now that we're talking about all this. Do you ever have concerns, right? Because there's all this stuff about to create well, you need to consume well and stuff like this. And sometimes I have this concern about steeping myself in too many other ponds, if you will, of like salespeople and sales consultants and stuff like that, because I don't want that stuff to just come into my world. I unintentionally repurpose it and then I put it out there, right? So on some level, I like to read the books. I don't, maybe this is the thing. Maybe I lean away from the content because I'm more concerned about the content creeping in than I am stuff from a book. I don't know. Is this something you ever think about?
Not from the same angle, but yes. I just want to be able to clearly have my own thoughts without feeling like I'm changing my opinion because I've read something new. I want to have a specific like pillar around a piece of information that I believe to be true. Developed that through various ways. And then as I read things, I just add to it and see if I need to adjust the pillar at all, right? Like, is it leaning one way or the other? Like, so, and I feel like if I read too much, just because I enjoy it so much, I can be in danger of, oh, well, it's maybe I should do this. Maybe I should do this. Maybe I should do this. Because I'm definitely open to learning and seeing what have I missed, you know, and where is there a better way to do this? But I also don't want to just be in the wind either, you know.
Yeah, Seneca talks about that you shouldn't have too many teachers, right? Because it muddies the water.
Yeah.
And I believe that to be true. Like I've told some prospects no because they wanted to work with me, but they're working with like 3 other coaches at the same time, and they're not even sales coaches. But I'm like, that's going to be way too many cooks in the kitchen. You're not going to be able, like, I don't like that for myself, right? If I'm going to have 2 people that I'm listening to and they're both trying to, you know, give me good information about improvements I need to make, invariably there's going to be some conflict between these 2 things. So work with one coach in an area at a time. Don't hire 5 sales coaches at the same time and be like, okay, which one is the best? No. You're going to be the one confused in that kind of situation. Yeah. So yeah, you gotta keep it somewhat clean and clear.
Yeah, and so I found that my reading habits, I don't read more than one author on a subject at a time.
You don't read more than one author on a subject at the same time.
So to your point, I wouldn't be reading necessarily 3 sales books or 4 sales books in a row.
Oh, yeah.
I would go read a sales book and then a marketing book and then a fantasy book and then a sci-fi book. And then I would circle back around and go, okay, time for the next sales book, to give my mind some time to go, I like that. I don't like that. This would fit here. Yeah. Okay. I'll take this from it. Like,
I like the idea of having like a rotating schedule. Do you stick to that kind of like alternating schedule, sales book, marketing book, sci-fi, fantasy?
Yeah. I mean, pretty much I'm not like rigid about it, but absolutely. I go at least 3 books in between a subject, and it may not always be the same 3 subjects, but I'm always at least going, okay, space. I'll get back to that. Because I can read, you know, when you can read fast too, it means I could read 2 sales books a month because I can read a book a week pretty easily. So,
and then invariably someone is going to be like, well, what are you implementing from those books? Which is an important question to ask, right? Because, you know, at the end of the day, reading another book is going to give you knowledge. It's not going to give you the experience of how to apply that knowledge. So you do need to be very thoughtful in actually going and try these things, because if we all got there just by reading all the books, right? I'd already be there.
Librarians would be the smartest people in the world. They'd be the richest people in the world. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it probably has to do with your experience level too, right? Because when you're younger, you want to read, well, people who like to consume want to read everything, and then they
Yeah.
don't apply. And what they most need in life is experience at that point. And so
Yeah.
it's the other way around. It's like if you want to read a lot when you're experienced, it's kind of like that. Well, that was good. I'll put that on the back shelf. It doesn't really, yeah. I took this one thing on to the next book. So I think there is a level of experience, even in reading and consuming and applying, that allows you as you get older to just go, that one wasn't for me. Okay, cool. Moving on.
Yeah. There's I don't remember exactly where this is, and I might be mashing up two different concepts, but one of the things that Jeb Blunt actually talks about in sales EQ is like one of the levers of like EQ is your ability to apply this information to other things in your experience.
Mm.
So the more experienced you are, the more times you've been through
Mhm.
these kind of processes, the more everything will kind of map to that because you can see it for what it is.
Mhm.
And then the other thing that I think is really interesting, where did it go? Hold on a second. It'll come back to me. But it's around this idea that the more you read, right? If a person reads 5 books and another person reads 50 books and they both read the same book, that book to the person who's read the 50 is so much more useful than the person who's only read the 5 or the 6 now, if that makes sense, because of all the accumulated knowledge of all the other books, right? And things like that. So there's like this compounding effect of continuing to read and consume and learn and these kind of things that, you know, I'm
Yeah.
butchering this as a
No, I get it.
conversation, but
No,
yeah.
I get it. Because I was just thinking, we're not biologists reading a study on a control group to find data.
Mhm.
Like our practice, our next set of practices depend on this data, right? So it's not like that severe. So I think that's why it's okay to read multiple sources, as
Oh,
long
yeah.
as when you go back to the lab, you've got your set of practices and you know what to do. But
Mhm.
there's certain instances where it's like, yeah, I don't really, doctors read research all the time because they want to know what new things are being learned about the human body, so that in their other regular practice stuff, they're going to have a new piece of information to
Yeah.
possibly apply. So I think that's where practically, in my mind, it applies well, because I do. My doctor is always an Army doctor, but he's a recovering Army doctor, as he says, and he says, I love to know all this stuff because I can just keep getting better at my job, right, and help
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. Learning shouldn't be um frowned upon, right? Like there's always more to the skill set out there, right?
Right.
And everyone talks about, my coach always said this line to me around your best or your best client is someone else's best prospect.
Mhm.
This always just kind of like stayed with me, right? So like if you're not following up and nurturing that thing, you're just making it really easy to get it stolen from you.
Mhm.
And I kind of think about that as far as like learning, right? If you get complacent because you're like, you know what, I know enough. There's someone out there who doesn't have that opinion for themselves. And they're out there and they're soaking up every little bitty amount of knowledge that they probably can around this thing. And you just have to know at some point, good enough no longer is, you know?
So do you think teaching in some ways replaces knowledge consumption in that role for you as you get older, more experienced? Because you learn when you teach, right?
Yeah.
Well, anybody who does that knows that. And so I don't have to go read about something necessarily to learn something about it if I'm teaching it, right? Because I'm learning from someone else's process still, which is what a book is. You're learning
hmm
from this process. I know that just came to me because I
Ask the question again.
if I'm teaching others consistently,
hmm
does that replace, in some ways, consuming? Can it, from like a function standpoint?
That's a really interesting question. I would say, oh man, how do I respond to this question? I would
Mhm.
say that for most people, they would be like, you know what, I don't need to learn because I'm not actually here doing it. And I think that if you're a coach or a consultant, I think that's a bit of a cop out, Personal opinion. Now, if you're in the role and you're learning and you're having to like learn by doing and then lead others and everything, you might not have time to be reading broadly, and that's okay, you know. But I think that's a slippery slope. I don't think, like, why would you want to take the chisel out of the toolbox and turn the big block into a wheel on your own when you could put it into this thing and have it come out a wheel better than you're going to be able to do with a chisel? Like, that to me is what like learning and being coached is
Yeah, so
never
I think
having to freehand something.
yeah, it's like learning a technique with the chisel from a master, right? That's the reading,
Yeah.
or being coached, even like a
Mhm.
coach tells you, and then you turn around and you chisel. And when you chisel, if you're showing someone else while you're doing it, you're explaining that not just that you can tactily do the technique, you can
Mhm.
now explain it to someone
Yeah.
as well, which means you have grasped the technique even more than just doing it with your hands. Now you can actually talk about nuance of the technique, not just the bang bang. It's like at this angle, the bang does this, right?
Well, that a lot of that is going to depend upon the person that you're learning from,
True,
right? Because
true.
if you're learning from someone like me, I'm going to be like, okay, cool. Here's this angle. Here's this angle. Here's the straight on thing, and
Mhm.
I'm going to give you all the connective tissue. But some coaches are just going to be like, oh, like, I mean, like, you might think you overpaid me, but really you're just going to hammer this thing, pop, pop, pop. You know, so it depends.
Yeah,
The
do it a
fit
thousand times and
between
figure it out.
Yeah, the fit between the person and the coach is super
Sure.
important, because that coaching style, that learning style, hey, just go do a bunch of it. Well, here's some information, so that way you don't have to do as much of it. You know, like, these are all just different approaches to helping someone else perform better. But
Yeah.
I think if you're coaching as you're doing, because it does make you learn it better, and I think there's value to that. I still don't think you're going to be able to communicate and teach it as well if you're not also pushing yourself on the developmental path, right? Because you might be like, okay, cool. And if we take this right angle here, we get to this really cool thing that I read in a blog post. Okay,
Hmm.
cool. Like, don't
Yeah.
try to coach from a place of like not knowing, in my opinion. But I don't think that doing the work precludes you from learning about the work from others. Well, that's an interesting thing, though, right?
Well,
Because
teaching does teach you though.
it does, for sure.
So I think my conclusion, and there's a lot we can talk about here, but my kind of summary, because I actually got to hop off here,
Yeah,
is
you got to go.
it's a different type of learning. So when you teach and you learn something, that's a
Hmm.
different type of learning than consuming or being coached. And so they're both valuable in the toolbox.
Agreed. Yeah. Now you guys make me want to have. How do you not already have a chisel coach?
Yeah, I already have 5 chisel coaches.
um,
That's awesome.
but like, thinking about in kung fu, my teacher was always like, okay, cool. As soon as you are good enough to like test on this, you then have to teach it to other people, right? So before you get to that place of unconscious competence, right, where you can do this thing on instinct, you're not having to think about it anymore. He wants you to like have to teach it before you hit that space.
Yeah.
Okay. And so when I'm thinking about that, of just my own personal response, is I would go in and I would teach it in the way that it worked for me. And then if it didn't get someone to that kind of like aha moment, I would go ask someone else who'd been teaching it longer, hey, come over. How do you explain this? Right.
Right.
And
Right.
then I might have two ways of talking about it. And then over time, because I really think that if you're coaching, I think there's a lot of ego in coaches, but I think that most coaches need to be less ego driven, right? Because then it's
Mhm.
about really not my method is the right one for you. It's about I can help you get to the outcomes,
Right.
right, that you're looking for. Because especially if you're a sales coach, if you're out here bragging about your close rates and your numbers, who cares? Like,
Yeah, how's that help
it,
me?
yeah, it's great. It's great that you can close deals. Michael Jordan is a phenomenal basketball player. He doesn't teach other people how to be basketball players,
No, he's
right?
horrible. Yeah.
Horrible, right? And he'll tell you that. He says it all over The Last Dance that he's not a coach, and that
Yep.
he needed Phil Jackson to turn him into the team player that he became into, that led that team to all the rings that they got,
Yep. Yep.
So that is through working with a coach and putting your trust in that person and allowing them to kind of steer the ship. Because, I'm sure that, I mean, during that time, Jordan could have gotten anyone on that coaching team fired. right? Laid off, who I mean, anyone short of the guy who he was having all the static with.
Right.
But, I think, yeah, like I think it's so easy to be like, well, this worked for me, so therefore it has to work for you. And
Mhm.
that, in my opinion, is bad leadership. That is bad as the sales manager being like, well, you know what really got me motivated? More money. So let's redo the comp plan because that's going to make these people want to sell more. No, you're missing the point because you potentially don't actually understand how your team is actually motivated. And you
Right.
need to go spend some time learning that stuff out, as opposed to just like, well, this worked for me, it's going to have to work for other. That's flawed.
Yeah.
So I think even if you're learning and teaching, or teaching as you're doing, you really have to limit the ego, so that way
Yeah.
you can go get help if you don't have what it takes to get to the person to that next plane that they're going for.
Yeah. I think that teaching is required on the path to mastery. I think that's where I kind of sit. Like you can go out and learn something and do something and be good at a job and never have to teach it and be fine. Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
However, if you want to actually master a subject or skill set, you have to be able to teach it as well. Now, I mean, you have to be a good teacher, but I mean, you have to be able to transfer those ideas to someone else. Otherwise, you don't really understand them well enough to be considered a master.
I agree. I do agree with that. If you cannot teach it to someone else and have them have a similar outcome, you're winging it.
Well, you're not in mastery level. You're just like
Correct.
pretty good at it.
Yeah, you can be very good and not be a master. And I think that's the really important thing to kind of talk about here, because it's okay to be really good, but like mastery is a whole other level. And mastery is about,
It's elite.
yeah, like it's
Top of
I
the
love
food.
that. Yeah, it's a leap. There's really good and then there's mastery. And it's a long path, right? Go read Mastery by like Robert Greene.
Oh yeah.
Phenomenal book. Holy crap, phenomenal book. But it talks about the struggles of getting to that place, of exactly how hard it is, about how hard it is to find someone to work under, so that way you actually have a shot at becoming a master in a craft.
Mhm.
Like, holy crap, you know how many bad coaches there are, you know how many bad entrepreneurs there are, people like that are not worth working with,
Mhm.
most of them.
Yeah.
Right? So you have to find what it is for you. You have to appreciate exactly how long of a path that it is. Like,
Mhm.
that book changed some things for me, like had a huge impact. Phenomenal book.
Yeah.
Highly recommend it to anyone who thinks that they're like a true master in their craft. Like, go read that book and then we'll have a conversation.
All right. So on the board today. Next time on the board today.
I started another one of his books actually yesterday, because I took the dog for a nice long walk, wore her out because she's a little wiener dog, and finished up Rackham's book, and then I jumped into what is it, the 48 Laws of Power or whatever, the other book by him that everyone talks about.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah, I'll be really interested to see what you think of that one.
Have you read that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, not a fan.
Overall, no. It's got some good stuff in it. It's got some stuff for sure.
Okay.
But it is very pitch anything, frame crash, raw, like you own the room, and this is how you control people and manipulate. And if you're not, then you're not real, and then you really don't master that. Like, okay, all right, yeah.
Interesting. Have you read Mastery?
No, actually, I haven't. But
okay.
I have sales EQ, spin selling, mastery. I feel like you mentioned one more. Sales EQ, spin selling, mastery.
We talked about fanatical prospecting, but you've already read that one. Oh, Never Split the Difference. Is that one on your list?
No, I was actually trying to write down all of them to see how many books we talked about.
Oh, the other book, honestly, that I think every salesperson should read, but it's not fundamentally a sales book, called hold on, I always forget the name of it. Getting Naked by Lencioni.
I've read that. That's good.
That is a phenomenal book, right? Especially if you know what I'm trying to do with like Sherpa.
Yeah.
It's a phenomenal book.
Right. Exactly. All right, Bill, I got to get going.
Yeah, man, you got to go do your thing.
Yep. So you actually already talked about what you got going today.
Yeah.
8:45 is when my first one is, but I gotta go prep. I gotta get that copy ready. I gotta, do all the stops.
Absolutely.
So-
I have morning focus time. I have a call at 11 to talk about one client, and then I've got this kickoff call at 12:30, and then after that I've got some catch up blocking and tackling and stuff. But first things first, I got to do some prospecting and some outreach. So always the first thing to do.
That's right. Well, go find your chisel coach and get to your week.
Absolutely.
Epic. All right. Thanks, everybody. Michelle, good to see you. Dylan, good to see you. Did you say who said that? The chisel comment?
I don't know. It was mysterious Facebook user. I'm not sure.
Okay.
So
We'll find out later. All right. Cool. Well, have a good day, everyone, and thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.